Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures that Outperform. I hope you've been following our series on how to increase workforce productivity. Nothing is more important than that at this moment in time, as 4,700 CEOs agree. About 40% of the time people spend in their companies is just wasted productivity. Companies don't know how to drive productivity. That means they don't get nearly what they should get done based on their payroll expenses, and that means they're not really going to outcompete and outperform the competition. So Terry and I have been chatting about this, and today we're going to be covering Equipped for Success, which is all about resources. And people have to be equipped to succeed. Companies start things up all the time, and they don't really make sure that all of those basic things they need to be successful on a project are there. And so I'm going to turn this over to Terry Mays, our certified culture engineer, to chat a little more about this topic and kick us off. Terry, all yours.
Yeah, so we're so glad that you're here with us today. This roadmap is like the secret sauce. Like we talk all the time
Yeah.
about how do you improve performance and productivity and how do you get a high performing team. This is it. This is how you build the culture that outperforms the rest of the teams. So if you're a leader that can actually connect some of these dots for your resources and help them come up with some of the plans that they need in order to become the employee that you need, this is going to be earth shattering for your team. So once you've got all the right resources, you've got all the right equipment and tools, and you've got the right people in the right places,
Mhm.
now it's time to make sure that they're skilled up with the skills that they need and make sure that they have all of the tools that they need. So they're not just struggling with silly things where they have to do a whole lot of manual processes, manual reporting, a lot of copy and paste. You
Yeah.
want to make sure that you've got some automation in your reporting and some tools that people can use to make their jobs easier. So being able to use chat bots, and everybody now is using AI for everything. So
Oh,
making sure that those tools are available for people to make their job easier. There's some mundane things that we have to do. Reporting is one of those things we just have to do, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming and overbearing. So if you can find some ways to eliminate some of the mundane things, you can create time for people to focus on things that are more fun and innovative. And that's where you start to see people thrive when they're able to do things that they love to do. When you see people working on projects and assignments that are challenging, but stimulating at the same time. They're not so hard and difficult and overwhelming that people feel like they want to quit, but it's just enough challenge where people feel invigorated from that challenge and they feel like I can actually solve this problem. You want to make sure that you're giving people all of those tools that they need. And sometimes that means changing staff. That means moving people around to make sure that you've got the right person in the right place at the right time with the right information. So be aware of who's in your organization. And we spend a lot of time talking about org structure
yep.
and the making sure you've got your position staffed properly, that you don't have a deficit in your workforce. All of that's so important. But once you get all the people in the roles, if you start to see that you have resources that aren't in the right role, then you really do need to take some time and reorganize. Go ahead and move that person to a place where they might be better suited, because it's just going to cause your organization to drag if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tara's on the money. There are so many companies and organizations where they don't resource for success. People have to have all the tools and resources necessary to do the work. Sometimes it does require them, to reorganize a little and move people around. They've got to make sure they have the real funding available. Don't start off a bunch of projects that you don't really have adequately funded, hoping you're going to find savings all over the place to get them done. Never works, actually slows everything to a crawl. We know that humans can really handle 3 to 5 things at once. At most, 3 is really the best. When you have too many demands coming in and you don't have adequate funding to do any of them really properly, you've just created a huge mess. And, you have to look at what information resources people need to get done what they have to get done. Maybe there is some, additional training that they need. Maybe there's all sorts of information and resources they need that's available elsewhere in the company on, let's say, a big re-engineering effort that they should have access to and be able to understand that terrain really well. It goes without saying that people need the right equipment and tools, quite honestly. I think that's, that list should be there, should be well thought out. And the reality is, if you could get those pieces right, then the people can actually engage and work productively. Because that's really what this is ultimately all about. Are they actually productive?
Yeah. A lot of the roles, Frank and I both have been in IT, and a lot of the roles that are in IT today are not the roles that we need tomorrow. So we're rapidly
Yeah.
seeing new roles emerge and new opportunities for people that have been in IT for a long time to learn something new. But that's going to take somebody sitting down and doing some road mapping. You have to really connect the dots for people and show them how to use the tools that they have in order to become the resources that you need. You often we send people through training and we don't give them kind of a targeted path. We just send them through training or we throw all of these different tools at the workforce. But if people are not tech savvy, they're not going to really understand how to use each of the tools that's been provided to them and how they can make the technology work for them. Even especially as something as simple as ChatGPT. If your organization has access to that, but if people are not tech savvy, they're not going to know what that is. They're not going to know how they can use it and how it can benefit them. And they'll be a little bit afraid of technology. So it's up to you as the leader to recognize what your organization needs, what the people need, and then actually map out some plans, show people what's possible, point them in the right direction. As the leader, you're responsible for casting the vision. It's not the responsibility of the person to figure out where they're going and what they're doing. It's the responsibility of the leader to cast the vision and show how this person fits in the organization. So when you're mapping out your org structure, you want to make sure that you're looking at your high potential candidates and saying, what can these people do
Mhm.
and how can I best utilize their skill sets in the organization? You want to take ownership of that as a leader and begin to unpack it for people so that they understand exactly what they need to do. But it's not something that people can just go figure out on their own because they may chart a path for themselves that's not necessarily the path that you need them on. So when you leave things kind of open ended, you leave them in a space where they can define what they want, and it may not be for the best interest of the team.
Oh
So
God. Well,
just be careful as a leader. Yeah,
yeah.
that you're casting the vision and not waiting for the people to cast the vision. Because, when people start coming up with their own plans, they, especially women, we have a way, we can come up with a plan. If
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't give one, we can create one, but it may not be what you really want. So just be careful as a leader that you're not pushing responsibility onto people that really should live. It should really live with the leadership team. The leader should be the people that are defining where we're going and then showing people how they fit in the new organization.
Yeah, and I think you really want to follow the process we've laid out, strategy,
Yeah.
planning, org design, roles and responsibilities. You've got to do all of it. You've got to get all of these different things right. The reality is that when you get down to resources, making sure that people really have the connections and relationships with the people they need to work closely with is super important, right? So
That's
relationships
right.
are a resource. It's a very valuable resource that you need. And if two teams are going to be working together, spend time for them to circulate and get to know one another. That's a way to properly get them staffed and working together so that they can do what they've got to do together. It's really important. Resources can oftentimes be overlooked. Some of the things that people need aren't provided to them. And you can see that a whole team of people starts going really slowly, generating reports because they don't have the tools, wasting tons of time, like Terry said, doing things that they're not well equipped for. And so, what really are the right equipment and tools? And AI, Terry, you brought that up, very timely. People given access to the corporate instance of Chat GPT, but they don't really know how to do prompts properly. So they aren't able to take full advantage of it, and they end up chewing up a lot of time. So this
Yeah.
is an important
Or,
thing. Again,
they're just afraid of using technology. We have to
yeah.
remember that, a lot of us didn't grow up with a tablet in our hands and a phone in
Mhm.
our hands like our grandkids, are coming up now. they'll be so familiar with technology that it will be a foreign concept to not have technology.
Oh yeah, I
Where
agree.
there's a large generation in the workforce that didn't grow up that way. So we didn't grow up exploring technology. Those are traits that we learned on our own if we learned them. But there's a whole segment of the population that never learned that skill set. And they are still not big technologically savvy people. So we
Yeah,
have to remember that as we're in the workforce to bring people along with us so that we don't lose people by the wayside because they don't understand how to connect the dots. We have to bring people along. And it's not necessarily something that's intuitive that people can just figure out on their own. If you're inquisitive and like me, where you're just kind of a nerd, and that's just no way around it. You just kind of love technology and you just want to sit there and figure it out. This is a great time for somebody that loves doing that because you
yeah,
can kind of chart your own course. But for people that don't like trying to figure it out, they just want somebody to tell them this is how it works. This is what you use it for. Here, go forth and conquer. That's going to be huge for people to be able to do
yeah.
that for them and not just waste time with them trying to figure it out.
Well, one of the other problems is that like I got into IT right out of college, never afraid of technology, but I do find at times there's just such a big learning curve. Sometimes there's too many tools thrown at people.
Yes.
And that could be as big a problem that the company hasn't really sorted out. What are they focusing on? What are the tools? Why do they have so many different tools doing almost the same thing in these places? Because each
Yeah.
one is a learning curve. I'm not afraid of any of them, but wow, it's just a lot of extra work when you have to go in and learn, multiple things that are similar. And that's where companies can really get the resourcing right to structure what those real choices are that are going to be the core of the company. And I think, look, if you want to succeed, follow this episode, how to increase workforce productivity. We're here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern time. We're covering episodes this week. We're obviously doing resourcing. Next week, we're going to be going and covering the importance of empowerment and how fundamental that is to the success of any organization if they want to drive productivity. So you should be here. We hope you could join us for this entire series and hope to see you next time.
Yes. Bye for